Hey Jets families, it's Karen Kilps, your school counselor, and thank you for joining me today as we talk all about sibling rivalry. If you have more than one child, it's a guarantee that you are going to be dealing with sibling rivalry. This can look like name calling, blaming, poking, hitting, stealing things, lying, arguing, tattling, breaking things that belong to the other, throwing things at someone, hiding things from the other. Sometimes just simply looking at each other can lead to some conflict. Sibling rivalry can be over some of the most random and absurd things. As I was preparing for this, I was reading an article and I found this tweet, which just kind of made me laugh, but it says, or Virginia says, "My children are currently fighting over an invisible bike that the 7-year-old won't share. I pointed out to the 3-year-old that she could just ride her own invisible bike, and she lay down and sobbed, but I only want hers." Sibling rivalry can be like that, right? It's just over some of the most silly things sometimes. Sometimes it's over big things, but sometimes it's silly things. My husband and his brother and sister sometimes joke about when they were young, it was like maybe like a yellow Tupperware cup or bowl or something like that, but they fought over that one. They all wanted that one. It wasn't inherently better, but something about having that one, I don't know if it gave them a sense of power or superiority, but there was definitely fighting that occurred over that cup or bowl or whatever it was. So even though sibling rivalry or sibling fighting, it's common, it's normal in families, it can still be pretty draining for parents and caregivers to deal with over and over again. So that's why that's something that we are talking about today, is why this happens and then what we can do. So yeah, we are going to start with the why. Why is sibling rivalry so common? Why does it occur? The first reason is because kids, and they are seeing perceived injustices. There's this natural sense of competition among siblings. They are often comparing what they have to what each other has. And kids do this anyway, but especially in these sibling relationships. I don't know how many times maybe I've heard or how many times you've heard one of your kids say, "That's not fair." It's again because they are comparing and competing with each other. They're comparing privileges, they're comparing possessions, and that ultimate resource, which is the love and attention of their parents and caregivers. So this leads to then that sense of competition between them. And this competition, I think, is even greater among siblings who are closer in age. Siblings can be a range of ages, and it can be a span of years, and they'll still fight. But there seems to be even a greater correlation when they are close in age with each other. A lot of times that means they are sharing more the same toys, or they're in similar activities. There's a lot of proximity that they have with each other, and because of that, it just leads to more opportunities for conflict. The same is true for same gender children, especially kids of the same gender who are close in age. There's going to be a lot of proximity, and again, all that time together, sharing activities, sharing objects, sharing, again, parents and caregivers. It just increases that sense of competition that we have, or that they have with each other. Just from my own life, I grew up in a family of 7 kids. Our ages ranged. The oldest is 13 years older than the very youngest, and I was the number 3 of 7, and I'm sure I fought with all my siblings at time to time, but I have no memory of fighting with my youngest 3 siblings, who were the oldest of the younger 3 was 5 years younger than me, and then the very youngest was 10 years younger than me. So we had this big gap. So we were interested in different things, and so I wasn't taking their stuff. They weren't taking my clothes. We weren't sharing friends and things like that, and so there wasn't as much fighting between us. But my sister, who was 15 months older than me, we shared a room. We had some similar friends. We sometimes took each other's clothes, took each other's stuff. When we were in high school, we even had a class or 2 together. So we were together a lot, and that just led to more opportunities for fighting. So again, there seems to be a correlation between gender and age of your kids and sibling rivalry, that conflict, that competition. Not to say that, again, kids who are different gender several years apart, of course they'll still be fighting, but there just seems to be an increase in frequency the closer in age they are and the genders that they are. Let's move to the next reason why it occurs. Sometimes our kids are just lacking skills for positive attention, so they might want the attention of their sibling or even their caregiver, their parent, and they don't really know how to go about it in a positive way. They don't know how to start or engage in activities that would be fun and playful, and so they just pick fights instead. And for them, sometimes that negative attention can feel better than no attention at all. So sometimes we call that attention seeking, but really it's just connection seeking. They're wanting that connection with their sibling, or they're wanting to be noticed by their parent or caregiver, and so they're going about it in the way that they know how. So it might just be a lack of skills in getting that positive attention. Another reason for sibling conflict, or maybe an increase in sibling conflict, is due to the modeling of parents and caregivers and how we handle conflict. So again, kids learn a lot by watching us. So how are we handling conflict with our significant others, with other family members, with our children? Are we shouting and yelling? Are we slamming doors and throwing things? Or are we speaking in a calm manner? Are we listening to the other person and to their needs that they're trying to share? Are we trying to hear people out, or are we just wanting to be heard? If we often find ourselves in conflict with others and we don't have the skills for handling conflict in a peaceful way, then our kids are more likely going to be engaging in conflict with each other, with us, with other kids at school, and not knowing how to handle that in a peaceful way. So kind of just being aware of how we ourselves are handling conflict, because our kids are learning from us. Another contributor of sibling rivalry or sibling conflict is family stress. Stress can play a big role in this. When the parents and caregivers are stressed, they might be less available to their kids. So that means they're less available to kind of deal with the conflict that's going on between their kids. But it also might be something that creates more conflict, because again, when parents are stressed, they probably have more on their plate, and then they're less available. And when they're less available, their love and attention becomes a limited resource that now these kids are kind of competing for. And again, when that competition increases, there increases that opportunity for conflict. So again, stress also can create feelings of anger and frustration in a home, which can then also be a fuel for conflict. So stress has a big impact on sibling conflict, both family stress, and if your child or one of your children or all of your children are in stressful situations, whether they're struggling in school, that's really hard for them, whether they feel overwhelmed, they've got too many things going on, whether they have friendship issues going on, or their own mental health struggles, maybe they're dealing with anxiety or depression or different things, all of that is also a factor that can contribute to sibling conflict and rivalry. So what can we do? We know that this is something that's common, it's normal, it happens. What can we do as a parent, as a caregiver, to deal with it? So sibling rivalry is not something that we can completely eliminate. When we are in relationships with others, conflict is a natural occurrence. The only way to really avoid this is to isolate oneself completely, but then you create a whole new set of issues. So we can't get rid of it completely, but there are things that we can do to help increase the peace in our home. So let's move into that. The first thing we can do is lose the labels. So our society often labels and categorizes people, and this can happen in our homes as well. Examples of some labels we might give our kids include the smart one, the athletic one, the outgoing one, the good eater. There's all sorts of labels that we give. Dr. Becky, she is a clinical psychologist. She has a podcast called Good Inside, and it's all about, she gives a lot of great parenting insight from a clinical psychology perspective, and she's, a lot of great teaching there. So she says that the success of one child is like an arrow in the other child's ego. And again, this is all about that comparison that happens with siblings and that competition that results from it. So when we refer to one child as the smart one or the athletic one or whatever, then the other child or children automatically think, well, then I'm not the smart one, or I'm not as smart as them. And this can lead toward feelings of resentment toward their sibling. Or if one child is labeled the wild one, so now we're putting a negative label on one of our kids, then the other might kind of get these feelings of superiority. Well, I'm not as wild as them, or I don't get as much trouble as them, or I'm more easygoing and well-behaved. So again, that still kind of creates a divide that we have between our kids. So we just want to be careful with labeling our kids, because that does contribute to the rivalry that occurs between them. Another thing we can do is look for what sets our kids off, looking for what's happening right before the conflict takes place. If your kids fight every time they play a video game together, it might be helpful to be within earshot so you can kind of be aware of what's being said and what's going on and what is kind of fueling this conflict. So looking for words that they're using, tones of voice that they're using when they're being combative toward each other, and then maybe trying to intervene before it escalates, before the emotions get so big. And because once it gets there, it's a little bit harder for everybody to calm down and deal with it peacefully. So kind of trying to intervene before it gets to that point. It's also helpful to consider the underlying need, and this even goes back to when we talked about discipline and behaviors, but a lot of times our behaviors are communication, and that's the same even in the sibling conflicts that occurs. So what's the need of your child? Are they seeking connection? When kids feel more secure and safe in their position in the family, then they feel less threatened by that sibling. When their sibling becomes less of a threat, then they're able to become more of that playmate and that friend. And so if our kids are feeling less secure in their place in the family, that's going to potentially lead to more conflict. So if we sense that might be something that is contributing, then we want to kind of tend to that area and tend to that child and make sure that they know that they are valued and loved and that they are an important member of our family. Limiting extra competition. So we've already talked about how siblings kind of naturally compete with each other, and so we don't need to add extra competition unnecessarily. So we want to avoid comparing our kids to each other, removing statements such as, why can't you be more like your brother? Your sister would never talk to me like that, or your brother always has such a clean room. Why can't you have a clean room like his? Or things like that aren't very helpful. And sometimes we might use competition between siblings to kind of motivate them toward a specific behavior. We might have them, race each other to see who can clean up the room the quickest or who can be done brushing their teeth first. And while that might get them moving a little quicker, what we're inadvertently doing is kind of pitting them against each other. So instead, we can maybe have them race the clock. See if you can have this done in the next 5 minutes, or team up with each other against us. Let's see if you all can be ready for bed by the time I finish cleaning the kitchen or something. So we want to look for opportunities to put our kids on the same team where they are working together. Then they're more likely to help each other and encourage each other because they're working, they have a common goal that they're sharing. So kind of limiting that competition that's already going to naturally be there, and look for ways to put them on the same team. Another thing we can do is teach those healthy, peaceful conflict resolution skills. One of the great benefits of sibling rivalry is it provides many opportunities for kids to learn how to handle conflict. Again, conflict is a normal part of our human experience. It's natural for it to occur in any relationship that we're in. So it's not a bad thing. It can be if we don't handle it in a peaceful, healthy way. But conflict in itself doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. And in this case, it can provide us a lot of teaching opportunities. So one great conflict resolution strategy that I like to teach kids is the I statement. Often in conflict, we make you statements. You're so mean. You're so annoying. You always are taking my stuff. You never help me. Things like that. And when we use a you statement, it automatically puts the other person in a defensive mode. They're in this defensive posture. Well, now they need to use like, no, I'm not. I do help you sometimes. I'm not mean. You're mean. Whatever. And the conflict just escalates. But with an I statement, we aren't accusing another person of something. We're just letting them know how their actions or words or behaviors, how they've impacted us. So an I statement starts with sharing how we feel. So I feel, and then I name an emotion. So I feel angry. I feel frustrated. I feel confused, lonely, sad. Name your feeling. And then next we want to share when. So describing now what happened. So when you took my iPad without asking, when you called me a baby, when you ignored me. And then we say what we would like. So we're going to describe now how we'd like to be treated or what we want to have happen instead. So I would like you to ask me before taking my things. I would like you to stop calling me a baby. I'd like for us to hang out and play together sometime. So I statements are a great tool for peacefully resolving our conflict. And this is not just for kids. This is something that works great in adult relationships, whether it's with a spouse or a parent or a sibling or a friend. Whenever something comes up, we just name our feeling about what happened and just let them know what we'd like them to do differently. And then also, listen, because maybe we've done something, and so give them a chance to have their own I statement, and then we work together to peacefully solve the conflict. Now we're on the same team, and it's not me against you, it's not my daughter against my son, it's them together against the problem, working it out so that they can solve it in a peaceful way. So I statements are helpful tools for handling conflict peacefully. All right, the next thing we can do is maybe try to do some problem solving in advance. And this strategy kind of links up with figuring out what sets our kids off. So if I know, again, that every time my kids play this video game together, they always end up in a big fight, well, then I can prepare them for it ahead of time, before they even begin playing. I might say to them, I've noticed that every time you play Fortnite together, or whatever the game is, you end up getting mad in it, and it kind of creates a big fight between the two of you. I wonder what we can do differently this time to make things go a little bit better for the two of you. A conversation like this, again, puts your kids on the same team. They are now working together to come up with some ideas about what they can do differently. Like they might say, I get really upset when you, I don't know, I don't play these games, I don't know. So when you, whatever, again, just giving them that chance to kind of talk about what usually contributes to the conflict, what they'd like to do differently, and if they start to see that they're getting mad at each other, they can come up with some strategies. Maybe we just need to take a break when we start noticing that we're getting upset or whatever, but allow them to become their own problem solvers and to do it before they've gotten to that place where they're angry at each other. When kids have a chance to come up with their own solutions, they're more likely to follow through with them anyway than us as a parent or caregiver just saying, hey, make sure you do this time or whatever. So give them those opportunities to come up with their own solutions, and they're more likely to actually put them into practice. And then finally, empathize with them. Empathy can go a long way in any relationship. Kids have a range of feelings about their siblings and about having siblings. And as parents, I know we want our kids to always be loving and supportive of one another. But there are so many more emotions that are involved in sibling relationships, such as jealousy, resentment, anger, frustration. And recognizing this range of feelings and normalizing them for our kids helps our kids to regulate these feelings. The more we're able to prepare our kids for these feelings, the less likely they are to come out as dysregulated behaviors. So this might sound like, it can be really frustrating having a sibling sometimes, or seeing your sister do so well in school, or seeing her play softball so well, that can feel pretty discouraging for you. And as your parent, I really want you two to love and support each other and be happy for each other's successes, but I know that can be really hard at times. When we empathize with our kids and the range of feelings that they are naturally going to have, they feel seen. And again, they feel like they have that place in the family, that they are important to. And again, when we can empathize with them in that way, then their sibling becomes less of a threat. And again, when their sibling becomes less of a threat, then they can become more of a playmate or a friend. So empathy is a very important part of parenting and in helping with sibling conflict. So in review, sibling rivalry goes hand in hand with parenting multiple children. There's a natural competitiveness that occurs in sibling relationships, and things such as gender and age of your kids can impact its frequency. There are several things that we as parents and caregivers can do to help with our kids and their sibling conflict, things such as letting go of labels, limiting comparisons of our kids, looking for opportunities to put our kids on the same team and teach them some of those peaceful conflict resolution skills, such as using the I statement. Some conflicts can get pretty heated and emotionally charged, and when that happens, I want to leave you with another little nugget from Dr. Becky from that podcast, Good Inside. She says sometimes in the moment, it's our kids, their emotions are charged. There's not any opportunity for teaching because when we're just super emotional, we can't receive it in that moment. So sometimes you just got to survive the moment and talk about it later. So your kids might be fighting on a long car ride. They're just really upset with each other. It's just not an opportunity to work through things peacefully. So just go back to that mantra. Survive, talk about it later. Survive, talk about it later. Sometimes we just need to get through it. So sibling rivalry can be a draining part of parenting, but it can also give us many opportunities for empathy and connection with our kid, as well, again, as teaching some of those conflict resolution skills that are going to be really helpful in any of their relationships going forward. So sibling rivalry, again, can be draining, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. There are some good things that can come out of it as long as we handle it in a helpful way. All right, I hope that some of this was helpful for you today. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to fill out that Google form with your top 3 takeaways from this presentation. Thank you so much.